Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Please let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and please remember to like the video so you know, we can get underway. I'm gonna recap day 2 of the hearing and go through my notes from the courtroom. So let's just get right down to it, shall we? Okay. My name is Richard Medhurst. I'm a British journalist. I've been covering Julian Assange's extradition case since it began, and I was inside the Royal Courts of Justice during the 2-day hearing that just took place in London. So what Julian is doing right now is he's asking for permission to appeal the decision of the lower court in 2021 on January 4th, 2021, because back then the judge did block the extradition, but she did only based on health reasons. When it comes to criminalizing journalism, accusing him of being a spy, all these political charges, she agreed with all of that. You know, that's the bulk, the real meat of the case, and you know, it is necessary and of course important to appeal that, because the US were later able to overturn the decision with assurances, and so, you know, it is quite a labyrinth, but that's why I'm here. I'm going to explain everything to you. So for those of you who are watching on YouTube, I'll have day 1 uploaded, but nevertheless, I want to go through my notes from the courtroom. I was live tweeting, so, you know, let's proceed with the thread, okay? So, you know, we go inside the court, right? Just so you know, Julian Assange was not there. We you know, during the Old Bailey hearings, he would come in a truck. They would, you know, take him an hour each way. And he was in a glass box, like in a glass cage, basically. And then other times he would attend remotely from Belmarsh prison. He was not present during the last 2 days, okay? Just so you know that. I understood that it's because he wasn't feeling well, and I spoke to someone who saw Julian about 3 months ago, and they told me that he looks like he's 70 years old. Okay, so that should give you an idea of what the United States have done to Julian Assange. They have you know, rendered him they've rendered his health in terrible shape. They're really slowly killing him. There's no other way to say this. So we began with one of the High Court justices. Her name is Sharp, right? So there is one man, his name is Johnson, and a woman, her name is Sharp, and she starts by saying, well, you know, if there are any technical difficulties, please let us know. Well, the thing is, there are always technical difficulties, which is really shameful, because the infrastructure of the court system, and it's not just this building, it's wherever you go, you know, is the whole process. Like, this is already 4 years ago. It was like this, you know. And I imagine it must obviously be the same for every other case. You can't hear anything. The people that are in the next room or, you know, watching remotely, they can't hear anything. And it's really scandalous. I'll go back into detail about that later. I was, you know, me and Chris Hedges, we went into the courtroom, we sat down, and you know, there's like to the left of the judges. So, you know, where the judges are seated, like, on their left flank, there's a bench that's perpendicular to them, and it's just a tiny bench. You know, you could have 4 people sitting there, and me and Chris Hedges, we sit down, and then this lady comes over, and she's like, you know, where are you from? I'm like, the press, you know, and then, like, basically she kicked us off this bench just so we move like 1 meter, because apparently this is reserved seating for mainstream media journalists who guess what, never show up. So you have, let me repeat that. There's a bench where they, you know, they get to put their laptops down. We have to put them on our knees, or if we're on tables that are again just a meter away, you know, you can do it. But they have this reserved for mainstream media who A, never show up, and B, just write bad things about Julian Assange, and C, don't know anything about the case. Just so you know how the court system works. I need you to understand this, okay? So in any case, and also El-Mazi, the same thing happened to him. Hamid El-Mazi, he, you know, and I don't know. It's really, you know, not okay. Yeah. So, and I wrote here, it reminded me of how, you know, the mainstream media journalists, when they turned up on day 2, because you have to understand, this is a 2-day hearing. On day 1, we're listening to Julian's lawyers, and on day 2, we're listening to the Americans, you know, for the most part. Julian's lawyers did speak, but it's mostly the Americans, right? So the journalists in the mainstream media, they mostly and mainly show up only for day 2. Why? Because when they go to write their garbage articles, what they're going to do is they're going to report what the U.S. lawyers said, meaning all the lies, all the smears, all the reasons why you should kill a journalist and why their work is bad because they're better than you and you don't like them and you're jealous. So all of the crap, they'll be there to report that, but they're not going to be there on day 1 to defend journalism and defend Julian. Just so you know what this press corps is. And it's the same thing that happened during the ICJ case. And it's the same thing, right? Like on day 1, South Africa is there. Oh, there's no live stream. There's no reporting about the case. You know, it's obviously not relevant news. Why would you care about this? You know, just the biggest war on the planet. And then the next day, oh, we're there to report everything the Israelis have to say to defend what's going on. This press corps that we have is the PR department of imperialism. You need to understand this, whether they're attacking journalists or attacking civilians. So going back to the court, right, and the arguments that they were making. So Dobbins, she's been there from the beginning, right? She's one of the U.S. lawyers, and again, just to be clear, the lawyers that are acting for the United States, they're still UK lawyers, right? They're not Americans, like American citizens, necessarily, right? They're people that are king. Well, now it used to be Queen's Counsel, it's King's Counsel now, but nevertheless, they are acting on behalf of the United States government. Okay, so that's why I refer to them as the Americans, right? So in any case, Claire Dobbins, she represents the United States, and she begins by saying that, you know, basically everything that the lower court did, right, like with Judge Baretzer, when she issued her ruling on the 4th of January 2021, everything she did was correct, right? Like except the health ruling. The smears, they were all correct. And she was right to say that Julian Assange is not a journalist, okay? And that, you know, the idea that this indictment, that this case against Julian Assange is some kind of construct, you know, to punish him, that this is it's a false view. And why does she, like, how does she justify that it's a false view? She says because the administration in the United States has changed, and yet the indictment is still there. Right? So Donald Trump launched this extradition case against Julian Assange. Joe Biden took over, and he keeps going with the extradition case. Now that's a Republican, and this is a Democrat. So the fact that both of them agree on this shows you that this is about the law. It's not a political persecution or prosecution. It's not selective. They're not punishing him for his journalism. It's just about the law. I mean, I even wrote, like, you already know what I think about how ridiculous that is, because we all know that Democrats and Republicans are equally imperialist and they equally attack the press. So actually, no, on the contrary, this especially shows me that it is political, right? And by the way, many of the crimes that Julian Assange exposed in the documents about the Iraq War, about Afghanistan, they were committed as well under both Republican and Democrat administrations. Nothing changed. What does that say about the United States? So then she goes into the classic smear, right? The smear number, like this is the biggest smear that they have about Assange and this case, and why, you know, the case is okay. Oh, he poses a very real and significant risk to informants, right? Like as if everything in the world revolves around U.S. informants, right? On the United States' right to spy and kill people, to spy on and kill people. This is the most important thing in the world. It's not, oh, they were massacring people in Iraq. They were kidnapping European citizens and torturing them and then making the European governments not prosecute CIA agents. This is not important. How dare you? How dare you mess with the U.S. informants and make them, you know, and inconvenience them? This is her argument. She doesn't care about civilians. She cares about U.S. spies. And so she says that there's I mean, not only is that a morally disgusting argument, but it's false. It's unsubstantiated. There is no proof for this. I dare anyone to name one person that was actually harmed by these disclosures, and you won't be able to find a single person. You know why? Because the United States government and the military tried to find a single case of this happening, and they couldn't do that. And this is something that we talked about in the court in 2020. So when this extradition case began, because they were referring to a previous task force that was set up by the US government and the military during the Chelsea Manning trial. Who is Chelsea Manning? Again, she gave these documents, the bulk of them, she gave them to Julian Assange, these crimes, these war crimes committed by the Americans, okay? And so she was court-martialed after that because she was in the military and she passed these on to the press. And so the United States government, when they were trying to prosecute, the military, when they were trying to prosecute her, because remember, the military have their own court system, right, and judicial system. When they were trying to prosecute her, they had to go in and look at, what they can throw at her in court. And they couldn't even find really a single person that was harmed by these disclosures. And so that is absolutely and directly relevant to the Assange case. Do you understand? So this is a lie. You need to understand this. I'm not going to sit here and just tell you what, the US prosecution is saying as if it's a fact. It is not a fact. As a matter of fact, it's a lie. It is a lie. There are no informants. There is not a single human being that has actually been harmed by anything that WikiLeaks has published. The only people that have actually been harmed are the people the United States government and military killed and tortured. So she says that, the security agencies, the US forces, all their work was damaged, blah, blah, blah. And she says that the way that Chelsea Manning downloaded the files and then provided these materials to Assange was indiscriminate, right? So that basically the fact that she downloaded all these files, right, and gave them to him and he published all these files, it shows you that they're not interested in doing journalistic work or exposing a few crimes here and there. No, it's just like it's about publishing and putting everything that the US military has out there. No, actually, the fact that there are so many files showing criminal behavior by US forces shows that there are so many crimes committed by US forces. It's really, it's an indictment, no pun intended, of the United States military, if anything. So once again, let me explain this. She's arguing that because they downloaded and published so many files, that this shows that it was indiscriminate and it's bad. No, it actually shows that the United States military committed so many crimes, and that's why there were so many files. So afterwards, she then talks about how, so that was a funny moment right there. In any case, yeah, apologies for this typo here. I must apologize for this typo because what happened is that Dobbins was alleging, not Manning was alleging, okay? I must underscore this. This was the US lawyer, Claire Dobbins. She was saying that Julian Assange was acting like some, evil genius who was trying to conceal the identity of Miss Manning after she gave him the documents, right? Like as if this is something bad. What is bad about hiding or protecting the identity of a source? This is a practice that has existed in journalism for eons. You always protect the source. That's the number one thing. When someone provides you with confidential information, you do everything not to divulge their name or their identity. So once again, do you see why this is dangerous? Why the case is dangerous? Because the United States lawyers are coming into the courtroom and they're saying, if you protect the identity of a source, then you're a criminal. No, it makes you a journalist, not a criminal. So afterwards, she also refers to this quote about curious. So the quote is, "Curious eyes never run dry," and this is a quote that the United States government claim comes from a chat log, from a conversation online between Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning. Okay. We don't know. We don't actually know if this really is Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning speaking to each other because they're using fake names, they're using pseudonyms, right? So we don't actually know, but the United States is claiming this. And why are they bringing this up in the court? I know for some of you who've been following this seems like rehashing of the arguments that were presented 4 years ago. Yes, that's exactly what it is, because it's an appeal. They're seeking permission to appeal on these very points, and they should. So the United States indictment is 18 counts, right? So they have 17 under the Espionage Act, which is ridiculous. Really ridiculous, right? That means if you're indicted and convicted with these 17 counts, you go to jail for 170 years, right? And then you pile on this other charge that is about this conversation, and it's about the United States government basically accusing Julian Assange of conspiring to hack to commit computer intrusion. So, in the United States legal system, conspiracy is a crime, right? I'm not going to go into too much detail about this, but it's a very peculiar aspect of the U.S. Justice system that, a conspiracy to do anything is a crime, right? So it's you conspired, therefore you're guilty. So the thing is that they're saying because he asked Chelsea Manning for more files, right? That's what he's implying, because the chat log is, or so it goes. Chelsea Manning said, there are no more documents. This is everything I have. And then Julian Assange supposedly told Chelsea Manning, curious eyes never run dry, which is, it basically means, well, if you go and look, I'm sure you'll find something else. Okay, but let us hypothesize for a second and say, yeah, okay, this is a real conversation. That was Julian Assange, and he said that to Chelsea Manning. So what? So what? Do you know how many journalists every single day around the world ask people in the military, in the government, to give them classified or confidential information? Once again, this is called news gathering, journalism. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not illegal. It is illegal for a soldier or someone who is bound to secrecy to divulge the information, right? If they get caught, fine, you have a case there. But, and again, based on the proportionality, like on the weight of what they have disclosed, maybe it's not illegal. I mean, if in the case of Chelsea Manning, what she did is an act of valor. How can you say that she's more guilty than the people committing these crimes? You can't. But for Julian Assange to ask for more files is completely and perfectly legal, because Julian Assange is not a U.S. citizen. He is not in the U.S. military. He has never signed a document or a contract that binds him to secrecy laws in the United States. Who gives a crap about the United States laws? Julian Assange is not a U.S. citizen, and he doesn't live or work and has never published anything in the United States. The United States can go to hell. And even if he did this in the UK, once again, Julian Assange he's not an employee of a government or military. He doesn't owe anyone, his allegiance and he's not bound to any secrecy laws, nor is any other journalist. You have to understand this. So you see why this case is so dangerous, because they're trying to criminalize everyday, like, normal practices in journalism. So afterwards, she's saying, like, this wasn't a slip or a mistake. It was the publication of a vast a tranche of documents on purpose, blah, blah, blah. And again, this goes back to the point that, yeah, well, if there are lots of documents, it's because there are lots of US crimes. And I said, literally all I'm watching right now, this is me saying this, okay? All I'm watching right now, like in front of me is a woman wearing a wig, and she's basically just like ranting and complaining that two people, well, actually it's just Chelsea Manning, but in English you say it this way, right? So complaining that two people downloaded government files and then published them, and then leaving out the fact that these files show crimes that are 1,000,000 times worse than anything she is possibly accusing them of. Like the crimes in these documents, like the United States military, shooting children and journalists and then laughing about it. And you hear them and you see the video and they're laughing about it. Or they're like shooting civilians, and you read these reports, these internal US military reports, like the most disgusting stuff, And like you want me to sit there and feel sorry for your supposed informants who actually never harmed in any way? I mean, it's really disgusting, It's really disgusting how they dehumanize the victims. Like the United States not only killed and tortured these people, they then want to punish the people that made this known to the world. It's really nasty. So here I wrote, make no mistake, what Dobbin is arguing to the High Court is that things journalists do every day, like protecting the sources, requesting classified materials, somehow constitute a criminal offense. They do not, and she is wrong. She is wrong in the EU, she's wrong in Britain, she is wrong in the United States, she is wrong in any jurisdiction where, they claim to be a supposed democracy, right? And so you need to understand this. So then, she goes on to say that these disclosures were found. She's trying to show, like, look how dangerous Julian Assange is. Oh, my God. So the disclosures were found in these camps that belong to Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, right? Like, she... as if they have no connection to the US, but okay. So she says they were found in Al-Qaeda and Taliban compounds, and they put the lives of informants and US spies in China and Syria and Iran at risk. And again, there's no actual evidence of this. This is just the United States claiming this. and then she says that basically this is not just confined to the files provided by Chelsea Manning. She's saying that basically Julian Assange is so dangerous, right? Like that he was trying to recruit people before and after Chelsea Manning to hack government computers and provide him with files. Yes, once again, I mean these are basic journalistic practices when you ask for confidential information. But there you go. And she then goes back to alleged conduct. Now let me explain what this is, okay? Because when she says other people, who are these other people? These are things like groups like Lulz Sec, okay, and Babu and so on. Like these are people that were accused of committing computer hacking crimes and cyber crimes, and the United States, what they did is they unsealed this indictment against Assange, and then at the last second they put out a fresh one, and then they added all this alleged conduct in there. And you need to understand something: these are not charges; they're not actual charges. They're not extra crimes or new crimes. It's in the United States. Again, this is particular to the United States. Okay, so in the United States, alleged conduct are not charges; they're just storytelling. They're just claims, but not charges. And yet, you can still receive harsher sentencing because of the alleged conduct. So right now, as things stand, Julian Assange faces up to 175 years in prison. Hypothetically, if the judges, in the US, in this secret court, give him 175 years, and they on all counts, right? And then take alleged conduct into consideration, it could be even higher. I mean, there are so many people, literally countless people in the United States that have received harsher sentencing. So they received a punishment that was beyond what they're being charged with because of alleged conduct. And these are not actual charges. It's just garbage fantasy storytelling that the government inserts at the in the indictment. But it's not proven. It's not even a charge. So it's really, I mean, authoritarian is really an understatement. It's like something Orwellian, truly. So she just talks about this, and it's just about making the defendant look bad. That's all it's about. It's just about making Julian Assange look bad. That's it. And then I said here that, it's fascinating watching the US prosecution talk for hours about everything in the world except the fact that these documents prove they have committed war crimes. So one of the judges, the High Court justices, right, he interrupts Dobbin, okay? And he asks her, what about the other organizations that publish these materials and are not being prosecuted? Now, if you don't know anything about this case, you might be confused by this statement. Like, if somebody else published these documents before Julian Assange, why is Julian Assange the one on trial? Yeah, good question. I mean, no one should be on trial because, again, they did nothing wrong. It's not wrong to publish these government files. The irony here, though, is that back then, there was a website called cryptome.org, okay? Now, cryptome.org are the ones that actually publish the files that Julian Assange is now being indicted for. So again, these are files that show U.S. war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they've also indicted Assange for Guantanamo Bay, the files about the Guantanamo Bay prisoners, and then the State Department cable. So the funny thing, though, is that the owner of the website, cryptome.org, he literally submitted a statement to the court and said, I am the one who published these files. I published them before Julian Assange, and the U.S. government didn't even bother charging me. They didn't even bother writing to me. They didn't do anything. So this was already back in 2020. And to this day, you can go on Twitter and you can look at the tweet and the timestamp, and you can see that how cryptome.org published the files before WikiLeaks, and no one cares. And this shows you that it's not about the law. If it's really such a crime to publish these files, why didn't they go after Cryptome? I'm not saying they should. I'm just showing you they're hypocrites, and it's not about the law. This is a political persecution. It's a selective persecution, and it's just about getting Assange. And they're getting Assange because, throughout time, he published not only these crimes in Afghanistan and Iraq and so on, but additional things, right? Like the Vault 7 leaks, and that's what angered the Americans. So over time, WikiLeaks actually became bigger than Cryptome.org. So in any case, you know, the judge is asking he's asking Dobbins about this, and she said that her response is so funny. Really, this was funny. She basically said that, well, you know, Julian Assange is still the one that is responsible for the files like ending up in their hands at the end of the day. Like it's still his fault somehow. Okay, I'm not sure how she comes to this conclusion, because it's really not. And I again have to explain something very important here, because Julian Assange, okay, WikiLeaks, the way that WikiLeaks functioned is that they would put all these files on their website for anyone across the world to access them. And it's truly like democratic, you know, public interest journalism. Anyone can access it. You can search for things and you can just look at the files as they are. Now, the thing is that the US government, to make sure that people don't see their crimes, they kept attacking the WikiLeaks website with distributed denial of service attacks, DDoS. It's basically, it's a way when you flood a website with requests, you overload the server to the point that the website crashes and it's unusable. Okay, the goal is to make the website unusable. And so the remedy that WikiLeaks came up with was they asked people, they made an appeal, and they said, we want people to just copy the website, to clone the website, and rehost it themselves. Like, just download the whole website and then upload it yourself so that other people can access it, even if ours goes down. Okay? Now, on the website, there were some files that were encrypted. Among them, these disclosures that WikiLeaks, that Julian Assange is being indicted for. Okay? Now, they're encrypted. There's a password. You can't just, even if you download it, you can't open it. The thing is, though, that there's a Guardian journalist. His name is David Ley. And this idiot, and again, I mean, idiot would imply that he didn't know what he was doing. I really don't know if it was on purpose or not. I'm not here to debate that. But the fact is, he published the password to the files in a book that he wrote. And someone put two and two together. They thought, well, you know, that's a password that Julian gave to David Ley. Maybe it opens these files. Guess what? It did. And then they published them. So someone put two and two together, and then she comes in this courtroom and accuses Julian Assange of something that a Guardian journalist did. How is that Julian Assange's fault if someone that he trusted goes and puts the password in a fucking book? Excuse my French. So you see how absurd this whole trial is. It's so absurd. It's like, no matter what way you look at it, it makes no sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. And it's very, very dangerous. It's very dangerous. So now she moves on to another point. And actually, I must say, the fact that the judge even asked her this question, I mean, I was taken aback a bit, because usually what happened in the previous stages, and again, I've been reporting on this case since the beginning. I've been to every single hearing in person or remotely, and I've seen all of it. The judges usually don't say or do anything, and if they do, if there's any interaction, it's usually to show contempt for Assange. You know, it's really obvious, like, this is a political persecution, and he's not even in the US yet. So I was surprised to see the judges even ask this, like, wow, you're starting to get what's going on here. Yeah. He didn't publish them, and nothing happened to the others. And again, it shouldn't, but you get the idea. So I don't know if they're putting on an act. I don't know if they're pretending to look interested and sound interested. I really don't know. But this is what I saw, and yeah, this is not normal that the judges actually seem to ask questions and ask good questions, right? But again, I'm not here to give you false hope or any hope. I'm just telling you what happened. Okay, so. Afterwards, they went into the differences between the Extradition Act and the treaty. Now again, this is another silly and crazy thing. So let me explain this. When two countries sign a treaty with each other, they have to go and then make a copy of the treaty in their internal domestic laws. Okay, so when the United Kingdom signs a treaty with another country, a bilateral treaty, like this extradition treaty with the United States, there has to be an implementation of the treaty, a copy of that treaty in British and English law. Okay, so usually the treaty will become an act. Okay, so the 2003 US-UK extradition treaty is known in English law as the Extradition Act between the US and UK. Now, the funny thing is that for some reason, one of the most important things in any extradition treaty is that you do not send someone to another country to be tried or imprisoned for a political offense. And a political offense is when you don't actually commit a crime. You haven't robbed a bank or held up, done armed robbery or something. It's an offense. It's against the state, such as journalism, right? It's not a crime. It's not a real crime. It's just something that annoys the government, but it's not criminal behavior. So what Julian Assange is guilty of at most is a political offense, but this is not, you should not be sent to prison for this, obviously. And nevertheless, for some reason, the extradition treaty says no extradition if it's for a political offense, but in the English version of that exact same treaty, inside the act, this part is missing. This provision is missing. It's known as Section 4. Okay, I'll show it to you on the screen. So it says very clearly here, extradition shall not be granted if the offense for which extradition is requested is a political offense. Okay? It cannot go ahead. It's not allowed. Okay? So if you want to send someone from Britain to the United States because this person murdered someone in the United States, okay. If you want to send someone to the United States to be tried for bank robbery, fine. But you can't send them because they annoyed the US government. This is not allowed. And yet this section is missing in the UK in the Extradition Act. Why? You just look at the timing. Because it was passed in 2003. What was happening in 2003? Why would this be left out in 2003? The war on terror had begun just earlier. And remember, it was passed in 2003. That means they were writing it already in 2001 and 2002. Okay? And the United States, of course, they were kidnapping people and rendering them, right? And snatching them off the street, and they still do. But the only international obligations and treaties that the United States love are extradition treaties. So you'll see them pull out of the World Health Organization, and they refuse to sign or ratify the Rome Statute and join the International Criminal Court or the or any other meaningful international treaties. But when it comes to extraditions, they love that. You know why? Because the Americans impose their own laws on other countries through the extradition treaties. And this is the best example that you can possibly think of. So the United States made the UK create a law that allows the United States to snatch people from Britain for, random bogus charges. So they could, grab any person they want. And that's what they're trying to do with Julian Assange. And many people have been sent before Julian Assange from the UK to the US, accused of terrorism and accused of this and that. And they've tried to get, for example, Gary McKinnon, right? They accused him of hacking, and they lied about it and said he caused so much damage and all these things. There's so many cases I could go into of the US government lying and lying and lying. But this is really perhaps the most egregious one, because it's really so clearly political. There's not even a semblance. There's not even an inkling of something that could be considered an actual criminal offense, a prosecutable offense. It's purely political. No, espionage is the quintessential, the textbook case of a political offense. Any academic, any person with half a brain will tell you this, right? Like there's no way around it. And she goes on. This is the U.S. lawyer, Claire Domus. She goes on for about 10 minutes saying that, well, in the original treaty in 1972, which was then redone in 2003 between the U.S. and the U.K., basically it doesn't matter that the provision is missing in the Extradition Act, because the point of domestic law is not to necessarily align with international law or with the international treaty. So she's saying it doesn't matter that these two things, which are supposed to be identical, are somehow not identical and lacking in protections. Yeah, whatever. It's not a big deal. It doesn't matter. Well, of course, because she would be out of a job. Well, out of the she would have nothing to prosecute in this case, right? And then she says that the notion that this indictment is based on a political offense, on espionage in the first place, she rejects it entirely. And then she says that like, how does she substantiate this? She goes back to what the district judge is, again, the judge in the lower court, okay, in the district court. Her name is Vanessa Bretzer. So the U.S. Lawyer Dobbins, she's referring to the ruling of the lower court, and she's saying that in the original ruling, the judge rejected the idea that there was any form of pressure from the United States government on the Department of Justice to demand Julian Assange's extradition, which is a lie, of course. But this is what she says. She says that, you know, the Obama administration refusing to prosecute Assange is not true, right? It's not true, that they never really decided on that. And again, this is very important to understand, because Julian Assange, WikiLeaks, published these documents when the Obama administration was in power. And at the time, the Obama administration, they knew that if they try to get Julian Assange and put him in prison, they have to go after everyone at the New York Times, everyone who published literally the exact same documents as media partners with WikiLeaks, right? And The Guardian and so on, right? And they knew they couldn't do it. You can't do this because, you know, you're violating the First Amendment, you're violating the right to free speech. It's impossible. And we know this for a fact. And she's arguing that and this is a very important point, because they argued extensively about this already in 2020. The response from the U.S. lawyers was that no, prosecution was always on the table. The Obama administration never ruled it out. It's not true. They knew that they can't do it because they would have to go after everybody. And so she just regurgitates and repeats this again, right? And then she refers to the Yahoo News article. Now this is again very funny, because in a sense I agree with her. Because she's saying there's no fresh evidence. Yes, I agree. We already know the CIA wanted to kill Assange. And you didn't need the Yahoo News article to clarify this point. Because in 2020, you had, like over 40 different witnesses that came and testified on Assange's behalf. 2 of them were anonymous. They were protected witnesses, right? Because of the risk to their person were their identity to be divulged. These were people that worked in the Ecuadorian embassy where Julian Assange had sought political asylum in London, and they worked for a company called UC Global. Now, UC Global was contracted by the CIA to spy on Assange because they had access to him physically inside the embassy and to the camera system, and they put microphones, and they did put microphones inside the embassy. So what happened is that these 2 protected witnesses told the court in 2020. And I was sitting literally with Fidel, Narvaez, who worked as the consul in that embassy, right? So he is more than familiar with this story. They told the court how they were talking with the CIA through their boss, especially Morales, about a plot to maybe kidnap Assange, maybe poison Assange. And they also had the CIA had ideas like, you know, snatching a diaper to see that to find out whether this to find out the identity of his children, because at the time it wasn't known that they were his children. Like, really just depraved behavior, really like weird, creepy, nasty criminal behavior by the CIA against Assange. And so we know since 2020 already that the CIA was plotting and thinking about killing him. So in a way, Dobbins is correct. It doesn't provide fresh evidence. But the fact is that we now have another additional thing. So it is indeed fresh evidence of 30 different people telling Yahoo News, and these are people that work in the CIA and know for a fact that Donald Trump and Mike Pompeo was director back then of the CIA, they had requested and drawn up sketches about killing Julian Assange, about, you know, having a shootout like in London, and they were cooperating with the British security services and talking with them about this, right? So the point is that these directions and discussions were coming from the top of the government, from the top of the executive. So there was pressure from the president, from the CIA director, from the executive, on the judiciary, on the Department of Justice in the United States to unseal an indictment and try to get Assange, if they didn't do it through, you know, kidnapping or rendition or murder. So, you know, this is very, very important. It's very important to understand. And she says here that now the U.S. lawyer is arguing that no, this is not true. There's no fresh evidence. You can't substantiate this. And she says that basically there's no plot against Assange here. And it doesn't address the point because, you know, she's basically saying, like, in so many words, what she's arguing is that you don't have any proof for this CIA plot. And even if you did, the point is we're charging him for publishing these documents and, committing an act of espionage. So that's why he's subject to extradition from the UK. And also, he is in UK jurisdiction in the first place because he was, his political asylum was rescinded, and then he was thrown out of the embassy. Thrown out is really, an understatement. There were these goons from the state came in and manhandled him and dragged him out because Moreno stabbed him in the back. So in any case, that's a whole other issue. But she goes on then to talk about the function of how WikiLeaks functions. She's basically saying that Julian Assange is not someone who just set up an online box where you can come and drop confidential documents of relevance that expose corruption or that are relevant to the public interest. And when she said this, I was so confused because that is literally what WikiLeaks innovated. Today, if you go on the Guardian website or New York Times or whatever, all the mainstream outlets, they have a function where you can send them documents anonymously. But they're not the ones that came up with this. Julian Assange and WikiLeaks came up with this. They're the ones. That's why it's so important, right? They're the ones who came up with this, that you can send them files anonymously. And so she said this, I was so confused. I was like, no, actually, that's really exactly what they did. But of course, she as a representative of the CIA and the United States government, she is there to spell out crooked rumors and lie to the court, of course. And so she goes on about how he's not a journalist and all this rubbish and how he's, this and that. And so, basically, yeah, this is what I just laid out to you guys. So I'm not going to repeat that. Yeah, and then the high again, Johnson. This is the male High Court justice. He interrupts her and he says, "Okay, well, hold on. If there's a journalist in this country, in Britain, and they ask someone who works in a government agency, a government intelligence agency like MI5 or MI6, for evidence or information about a government crime, significant crimes committed by the government, and they ask someone who works there, is that a prosecutable offense?" And then she literally hesitates for a moment. And I was like, yes. So because again, this is a great question, and I was surprised that he asked it because once again, the entire process here against Julian Assange is extremely biased by both the UK and the US. So I was surprised he asked this because this is a very important point. This is just basic journalism. There's nothing wrong with a journalist asking someone who works at MI5 or works at the CIA or works at MI6 to give them files of government crimes. On the contrary, this is their responsibility it's their duty to do so. And so she doesn't know what to answer because, he's undermined her entire case. Like, what's wrong with that basically? And then she says, he then asks her, do you accept that journalists are in a different position? And then she says, yes, but you have to be careful because prosecution would only really get off the ground if you could prove that the journalist was seeking these files with the intent of causing damage to the government. So again, we go back to, or she goes back to her original smear that, Julian Assange, like, maybe this would be journalism otherwise, but he just wanted to cause widespread damage. No, the government crimes by the United States are so widespread that there were so many files. It's really funny, how she sees the world upside down. But anyway, so then she goes on to say for like about an hour, really this whole thing went on for about an hour where she's saying, oh, he's not a journalist and he's so bad, he's a naughty boy for seeking out classified materials. And as I said, the United States is clearly trying to make journalism a crime, even outside the United States. I mean, again, it would be already bad inside the United States, but this is, she's acting on the behalf of the US government in a London courtroom and trying to make journalism a crime in England even, right? So, I mean, it's really scandalous. It's really scandalous. And make no mistake, this is exactly what transpired in the last 2 days and what has been transpiring for the last years. And even you could also argue before the indictment itself, before the case itself, they were trying to de facto make journalism a crime by persecuting Assange rather than prosecuting him. In any case, Stefania here, who was also in London. It was great to see her. She was saying here, the United Kingdom, the UK authorities had 2 months to organize a hearing where there are microphones in the courtroom for allowing journalists to actually hear what is being discussed, plus tables for them to take notes and use laptops. They chose not to do it. They chose not to do this, even though they had 300 press requests for the Julian Assange hearing. Once again, I have to admit to you that every word that Stefania says is correct, without question. And the funny thing is that the people working in the court, many of them know what's going on. One of them even asked me, like, he asked me straight up, do you think that this is an independent judiciary? And he's talking in relevance, like, to the United States and Assange. Like, basically, he's asking me, is this institution controlled by the United States? I told him, yes, of course it is, because they know, the people working in the court, they know this, that, and again, I'm sure that the majority of them, they're really there, because they're trying to do good work and stuff. But you have people at the top making sure that what Stefania just outlined doesn't happen. That you have basic bloody tables set out for journalists to attend, the trial of the century, the most important court case, something that actually criminalizes the job that people are trying to do inside the court by reporting. But it's really Orwellian and dystopian to see it with your own eyes, and I'd rather I not see it at all, and that it doesn't happen at all, because it's really not worth it. But really, I don't understand how a country that has so much money, a country that invented the microphone. You have to remember the England, the United Kingdom. There was a period of excellent scientific discovery. The telephone was invented, the microphone was invented, stereophonic sound was invented. All these advances were made by British scientists, and yet half the microphones don't work in the courtroom. So the journalists that are sitting next door to me in the overflow, or the ones that are watching, that were allowed to watch remotely, they can't hear what's going on. I mean, this is scandalous. How much does it cost to mic up the lawyers? There are literally 3 or 4 lawyers in the room, plus the 2 judges. Me, Richard Medhurst, I will pay for the microphones if it comes to that. All right, okay, that's my offer to the judiciary. I will pay for them. You can have them. Keep them forever for every case. Please use them. Because really, I mean, it's not a good look. It's really not a good look. Forget the case against Julian Assange and how scandalous that is. Just, from the point of view of infrastructure, it's really not a good look. And the building, by the way, speaking of looks, is really gorgeous. And you shouldn't think for a second, oh, it's an old building and therefore the sound. It's nothing to do with this. This is something that has plagued this case, no matter where we're at, in the Old Bailey, Westminster Magistrates Court, or the Royal Courts. But, I just don't understand. And I said this in my speech afterwards, like, they're spending £1 million per missile. Every single missile that they fire at these Yemeni drones. They're called Sea Vipers, the missiles. £1 million each. And they can't mic up the room. Please do better. I don't know who's in charge of this, but please do better. I beg you, really. So in any case, she makes an excellent point. And I must reiterate that there are people who have been covering this case from the very beginning, like Kevin Gostola or Mary Kostakidis, and who are not only, who've not only done great work, but who are literally located in countries with relevance to this. Yeah, Mary is located in Australia. Julian Assange is from Australia. Kevin is in the United States. The United States is the requesting state in this indictment, in this extradition case. How are they not located in relevant jurisdictions? Not to mention the fact that they have done a lot of work since the very beginning. I mean, the fact that they were not allowed to follow these proceedings, I really don't think that's okay. Like, they shouldn't have to. This was never an issue for them to follow remotely. It was never an issue. So why is it an issue now? And especially when you have people from mainstream media who are given access and reserved tables, and don't even show up. Like the contempt they have for this case and profession. Like, go work as something else. Go work as a doctor or a plumber. Like, why do you bother being a journalist if you don't even care about journalism? Just go do something else. You call yourself a journalist and you don't even show up to cover this. Just go do something else. So in any case, this is another great question from one of the judges, from the High Court justices, from Jeremy Johnson. He asks the U.S. lawyer, like, head on, if there's any evidence to support the idea that foreign nationals are given equal rights or treatment to U.S. citizens, and she flat out says no. So what does this mean? What is he talking about? he's asking her if Julian Assange is sent to the United States and he is in the US jurisdiction, will Julian Assange have First Amendment rights, meaning free speech? And she says no. Now, this really angers me, because how are you saying that Julian Assange is guilty under US law, even though he wasn't in the US and he is not from the US and doesn't live or work in the US, but he isn't allowed any protections under US law? Like, you're applying all the bad things about US law on Julian Assange, but all the good things, he doesn't get any of them? What is this? Again, I'm going to repeat this because it angers me and you need to understand it. The United States are saying, here, all this bad crap that we have, the Espionage Act, you're guilty, even though you weren't here and you're not from here. But these good things, the First Amendment, sorry, you don't get any of this. No, not allowed. I mean, and the lawyers, like the U.S. lawyers, are flat out acknowledging that, yeah, you know, we don't know yet if we're gonna argue this in court, and they absolutely will. I'll expand on that in a second. But she basically confirms that, yeah, there's no evidence to say that someone who is a foreign national, meaning they're not a U.S. citizen in the U.S. jurisdiction. So there's no evidence that someone from the UK or from Australia who is extradited to the United States is then given protections under U.S. law. Okay, so now, do we know if the United States is going to argue this in court? Absolutely. I mean, one of the federal prosecutors, his name is Kronberg. Okay, so AUSA Kronberg. He told the court in so many words that this is what they're going to do. He didn't flat out say it, that yeah, we're going to go and argue that he doesn't have any. But I mean, he did. That is exactly what he did. Because sometimes the United States, the way that their officials speak it's like the mafia. You know, they'll say something, but it's actually, you know, it's very clear. It's a veiled threat, or it's just a straight up threat. I mean, you know, there's really very limited distinction between the two, in my opinion. So I am telling you, I've been following this from the beginning. The United States is going to absolutely, without question, argue that Julian Assange has no free speech or First Amendment rights once he is in U.S. jurisdiction if he is extradited. I guarantee you this. I guarantee you this. So, and again, this is scandalous without question. So then we had a break for lunch. We come back in, and then we talked about sentencing enhancement or the rule of specialty. So you have to understand something in the way that extraditions work traditionally. And again, this is so funny because this is the second thing that is supposed to be there in any extradition, but is missing for some reason. The first thing I talked about already, which is that you do not extradite someone for a political offense, and yet this is happening for some reason to Julian Assange. The second thing is rule of specialty. For example, if the United States say, well, this guy robbed a bank in Tennessee and we want to extradite him there, you can't say once he arrives in Tennessee, well, you know, he's actually a serial killer. Which one is it? Is he a bank robber or a serial killer? You can't charge someone with crime A and then, you know, convict them of crime B. And yet the United States have actually done this. And I'll highlight a case in a second. So they were talking about this, right? About these additional punishments. Because the rule of specialty stipulates that you cannot charge someone with a crime in an extradition and then convict them of a different crime once they have been extradited. This is, you cannot give them additional charges or additional punishments beyond the scope of what they are being extradited for. This is very important. This is, you know, this is enshrined in every extradition treaty. It's a principle in that is eons old and ages old. Okay, so it's an age-old principle in customary extradition law. So when we go afterwards to Smith, now Smith is another lawyer that was speaking on behalf of the U.S. So Dobbin, the woman, she sits down. Now we're hearing from Smith. So he was speaking on behalf of the U.S. and basically saying that you know, Julian Assange, what he did is just hacking, right? Like he has committed cyber crimes on the highest end of the spectrum or the farthest end of the spectrum. And he disclosed the most sensitive materials. And once again, it's like, you know, I'm watching a man like 1 meter away from me talk about how horrible it is to publish U.S. government secrets, but he doesn't care about what's in the files, which show crimes a million times worse, like, you know, people being tortured or murdered. Anyway, So he says, he once again goes through this crap about, oh my God, the global ramifications, the poor US informants whose names were disclosed, not just in Iraq and Afghanistan, but also in Syria, China, and Iran. Like, you know, as if that makes it somehow worse. Why are you spying on all these countries? Why are you in these countries? Get out. Like, anyway, so he then goes on to smear Assange as a recruiter of hackers, right? And this is, of course, a tactic to chip away at his credibility as a journalist. This is why all the mainstream media show up on this day, because they're going to go, you know, what I'm telling you, I tell you what both sides are saying. I'm there on day one and I'm there on day two. BBC and all these people, they either don't come in at all or they just come in on day two, so that you only hear what the US side are saying. You know, what he argued afterwards, what Smith was basically saying, okay, in so many words, he was basically saying that the crimes Julian Assange has allegedly committed are so bad that you can't really talk about the rule of specialty or disproportionality because his crimes are so bad. So he's basically saying you don't have to worry about Julian Assange getting to the United States and then being hit with all these like additional crimes and charges and punishments, because he has committed something that is so bad that he deserves whatever is coming to him. This is what he was arguing in so many words. And again, I highlighted in brackets, Julian Assange is being threatened with almost 2 centuries in prison. Like, you're threatening this guy with punishment that, you know, even like Nazi war criminals haven't been given, and you're saying that like that's still not enough. Like, that if, you know, on the off chance he gets hit with something even worse, you know, whatever. Really scandalous behavior. So then he sits down and yeah, actually he was talking for about 45 minutes. I said 10 minutes for some reason. He was talking for a bit longer. In any case, he sits down and now we hear from a third lawyer. Now remember, this third lawyer is not representing the United States government, because this appeal or this hearing is Julian Assange's team asking the High Court to appeal 2 things. They're not just appealing the ruling from 2021 where the judge in the lower court says, yeah, your behavior is criminal, journalism is criminal. What Julian Assange is trying to appeal as well is the decision by the Home Secretary in the UK when she said, okay, extradite him. They're saying that she was wrong and it was illegal for her to do that. Because, why? Because the Home Secretary in the United Kingdom, or I say she because it was a female, Priti Patel, and now we have Suella Braverman, and before that, I remember Theresa May. So they've all been females as far as I can remember them. But in any case, the Home Secretary, in their function in the United Kingdom, they are the ones who have the final say on an extradition. If they really want to stop it, they can stop it. Okay, they have this power, period, and the United States can go to hell. So now we have a lawyer who represents the United Kingdom government, the UK government, who is coming to the High Court and arguing, this is what happened here, that actually, no, it was correct and it was lawful for the Home Secretary to okay Julian Assange's extradition, and this is why. So they started saying that basically, you know, it was not the Home Secretary's place to start distinguishing between the extradition treaty and extradition act. So you remember what I was talking about just earlier, that in the extradition treaty, so this is the agreement between the US and the UK, you can't extradite someone for a political offense. But in the extradition act, in English law, this provision, this protection is missing for some reason. And so the lawyer for the government is saying, look, it's not the Home Secretary's job to sit down and comparing the treaty and the act. The Home Secretary is bound by the English version of the treaty, by the law inside the UK. That's it. That's the scope of her, her responsibilities. And so that's the way it is. That's their argument. Okay, this is what she had to work with, and that's it. And then one of the High Court justices, Johnson, he asks this government lawyer, you know, once someone is in the United States, is there anything preventing the United States from piling on new charges and handing down a death penalty? So now we're not only talking about the rule of specialty being violated, where you're extraditing someone for crime A, but then you're punishing them for crime B and C as well. He's not only asking about this, he's asking the government lawyer, what about the death penalty? How do you know Julian Assange won't be given the death penalty, right? This is a very important question. And then the government lawyer says, actually, we don't know if, Julian Assange would be or wouldn't be given the death penalty. I mean, Jesus. Again, this was a very good question from the judge. I was, again, astonished to see him asking this, because this is exactly what he should be asking, and I'm glad he did. And it's funny to see the government lawyer just answer it so straightforward. It's almost as if they're too tired to keep up with the charade. I don't know what it was, but again, it's like they're being fairly honest. They're saying, yeah, he could get the death penalty. Yeah. I mean, as I wrote in brackets, this perfectly encapsulates everything wrong with this case and how dangerous it is to Julian Assange. Because remember, in the United States, they have the death penalty. But, and by the way, espionage, they could turn this into, things like treason and espionage are traditionally considered capital offenses, right? So you could absolutely give someone, whether they actually are guilty of it or not, I'm just saying in general, the United States, if they want, they could say, well, this is a capital offense, and you get the electric chair, which is outrageous, because the United Kingdom, British law says you cannot send someone to any country in the world, the US or otherwise, if they will be sentenced to death. Doesn't matter. They're a serial killer. Doesn't matter. We're not sending this person if you sentence them to death. That's what British law says. So this is a very, very important question. And I will just highlight as a side note that even if Julian Assange is sent to the US and they give him, let's say, 30 years in prison, I mean, the guy is 50. When you give someone who's 50 years old a 30-year prison sentence, it's akin to a death sentence already. And the conditions that he would be in, this is not like, some leisure court prison. He will be in the worst, literally the worst goddamn prison in the United States. He'll be in ADX. He will basically be in Colorado, right? So in under special administrative measures, which are, really they're torture. I've gone into great detail about this before. They're absolute torture. Okay, and in that prison, one of the wardens actually compared it to hell. I mean, it's ADX Florence in Colorado. He said that when you go in there, you never see the sun again. That's what the warden, the guy who runs the prison, the former warden, said. When you go in, you never see the sun again. So you get an idea of why anything Julian Assange would receive in the United States is a death sentence. But I'm glad the judge asked this question, because the Home Secretary should have blocked the extradition on this alone. Never mind the fact that Julian Assange is being extradited for something that is unextraditable, right? It's a political offense. You can't go ahead with this anyway. Not to mention the fact that there is a very high risk he could be sentenced to death. So then we had Fitzgerald, who took over for Assange. This is one of Assange's lawyers now. So most of the day, throughout the day, we're listening to the prosecution, to the US lawyers speak, so they could give their side of the story, their side of the argument. But Julian's lawyers were allowed to speak as well for a limited amount of time. So we had Fitzgerald, who then addressed the High Court, and he said basically that regarding the disparity between the treaty and the act, he said, look, the treaty exists. It's not parachuted in. That's the term he used. It hasn't been parachuted or dropped in just randomly. The treaty exists. It was signed by the US and by the UK. It's an agreement between both of them. And not only that. So his point is, you have to respect the fact that it says you can't extradite someone for a political offense. You have to protect Julian Assange under Section 4, because this was signed by both countries. And he says also that this is the vehicle through which the United States has made the request. The United States, they didn't go to the UK and say, we want Julian Assange based on the Extradition Act. They say, we want Julian Assange based on the Extradition Treaty. The treaty. What does the treaty say? You can't send someone, you can't extradite someone for a political offense. Is this a political offense? Yeah, it is. So Assange cannot be extradited. This is the argument. So he also says that you have to identify a real reason why the extradition could reach a real injustice, right? And his point here is that what Julian's team are arguing, they're not saying, and this was the quote, oh, the system is bust and everyone goes free. So his point is not that let's just throw the whole treaty and the act down the toilet and flush it down the toilet. That's not what they're arguing. They're saying the legal test, the threshold, is this person that the United States are requesting, is it likely that they will be sentenced to death, or that they will they will suffer a gross injustice against their physical or mental health once they arrive there? If the answer is yes, then you cannot extradite them. That is the test. Okay, so they're not arguing that everyone should go free. Obviously he's using hyperbole here, but that is a very, very pertinent point, right? He's saying that you have to demonstrate that a real injustice could arise. And if that is true, and it is true in this case, then you have to block the extradition. Then Mark Summers took over. Mark Summers is another one of Julian Assange's lawyers. And, with all credit to Fitzgerald, I have to admit that during this particular hearing, Mark Summers, he did a better job at spelling things out more clearly to the judges. And by that, I mean, because when you listen to these people talk, their sentences are like 10 kilometers long with 50 million commas in between. That me personally, I don't think it's an excuse that it's legal jargon. I'm covering a bloody court case, so I can keep up. You have to say things clearly to the judges, and Mark Summers did this. He achieved this. He said, "Look, when a government is prosecuting someone for a crime, for a publication, right, for something that they published, and this publication, the disclosure, contains evidence of government crimes, then yeah, there's a link here. You can't behave or pretend the link doesn't exist." So he's saying that the US government are going after Assange because Assange exposed the US government as criminals. That's what's going on. So, it's a political and it's a selective persecution, and it makes Julian Assange a refugee. This is the term he used in the modern and legal sense. That's exactly how he said it, right? It makes you a refugee in the modern and legal sense. And then he said that once that's recognized, so once you've established that this has been engaged and you've reached this threshold, that yes, the government is going after this person because this person exposed the government, then it's clear that you're prosecuting somebody for the publication of exposing state crimes. And then you fall squarely within Section 81 of the Extradition Act, and extradition should be barred. So once again, this is something that basically is made even more clear in other parts of British law, but they're also choosing to ignore that. So my point here is basically that you have things that could protect Julian Assange in so many ways. Okay, here they're talking specifically about this, but I'm telling you that there are so many things that you could stop this extradition under, and protect Julian Assange. But for some reason, we've been discussing this for 4 years, which is really telling of what they're trying to do. Right, so this is again about extraneous conditions. Okay, and so this Section 81 again says that basically you can't extradite someone if they're prejudiced against at trial or punished or detained because of their political opinions. And basically, what are Julian Assange's political opinions? That the U.S. government are criminals, and that's why they're going after him. Therefore, the extradition is illegal and must be barred and blocked. And so then he makes another excellent point. So now he directs his comments towards the federal prosecutor in the United States, Kronberg, and he spelled this out very clearly. Because he's responding to what the U.S. lawyers were saying, right? And he says that Julian's team, the lawyers, are not accusing the U.S. federal prosecutor Kronberg of being a bad man or being someone who engages in his duties, in his professional duties, in bad faith, right? Or who does a sloppy job, or who is evil. They're not making this argument to the court. They are making the argument that this case against Julian Assange came from above his head, right? It's coming from up top in the government, okay? It's coming from the United States president. It's coming from pressure within the executive on the judiciary. Okay, so again, it's very well said. And then he said exactly these words: "You can't focus on the sheep and ignore the shepherd." I thought that was well put. And so he said that this is state retaliation ordered from the very top. Right? These are also the words he used. And he said, look, the proof for this is that the matter lay inexplicably unprosecuted for 6 years. For 6 years, no one did anything legally against Julian Assange for these documents, right? No one did anything. And then all of a sudden, once the International Criminal Court were looking at investigating the United States for war crimes in Afghanistan using some files published by Julian Assange. Okay, and once the Vault 7 leaks were published, which were about the CIA, the timing of these things, you know, it's not random that these things happen and then suddenly, oh, there's a case against Julian Assange in the US. They want to extradite him. It's not a coincidence. The extradition case is because the ICC started looking at prosecuting US officials for war crimes using Julian Assange's publications, and because he embarrassed the CIA with the Vault 7 leaks. Okay, so not only that, he then says that it was followed by political denunciations of Julian Assange. So it's not just the timing, but literally they're coming out in speeches and saying, Trump was saying Julian Assange deserves the death penalty, and Mike Pompeo is saying WikiLeaks is a non-state hostile intelligence service. So they're literally coming out on camera and saying this in their words. They're politically denouncing Julian Assange, in addition to, of course, the legal prosecution and case against him, right? So he then says that, you know, the US lawyers are basically coming into this court and telling the judges, like, we are engaging with the best of intentions. We are only trying to uphold the law. We're not here to carry out a political persecution against Julian Assange. We just care about the law. That's not true. And so he says we can't, you know, say that this can be advanced with a straight face while the president of America is planning to kidnap, murder, and render Assange. This is absurd. And so he then talks about the fact that, you know, Julian was basically trying to warn the White House at one point. He was phoning the White House even and telling them, you need to stop these documents being published. And that shows that he was also trying to help them avoid, you know, unredacted documents being published. But they didn't care. They did nothing. And again, this is important because they're accusing him of publishing unredacted documents, which is another lie, because he not only called the White House, but he spent so much time with journalists, media partners, trying to redact the bloody documents. They did this. This is a fact. So he then goes into the issues about Julian's, you know, basically Julian's rights under the European Convention on Human Rights, because, you know, if they do not get permission to appeal, what's going to happen afterwards is that they will go to you know, Julian's lawyers will make an application to the European Court of Human Rights. And remember, despite Brexit, the UK is still a party to the Council of Europe. So this is an avenue that is open to them. And then, you know, what was funny is that actually, I'll go back to this afterwards, but I just want to say there's a funny moment because one of the judges, the woman, she asked Julian's lawyers, like, hold on, like, are the names of these informants and people in the documents the same ones that carried out all these crimes, like torture and war crimes? And he's like, yeah, basically. I just found this funny because, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the whole point, isn't it? What are the United States whining about? They want to protect the identity of criminals. That, you know, is obviously not every single name in there, you know, is the name of a torturer or someone who carried out a drone strike or murdered someone. But they have all upheld this regime of war crimes, right? So in any case, you know, they were talking about Julian's rights under the European Convention of Human Rights. And I mean, I went into this in detail a few years ago, but some of the main violations that they listed would be Article 5. You know, Article 5 says that you're protected from arbitrary and unlawful detention, okay? So you cannot be held in prison, jailed, for something that is not an actual crime. And if you're putting Julian Assange on remand in prison, you know, while pending his extradition, because of something that is a political offense that is not a crime, then you're violating the treaty, the extradition treaty, and then you're violating Article 5 of the European Convention on Human Rights. And so this was basically the Julian's his lawyers' ways of you know, telling the High Court judges, like, look, if you guys don't give us permission to appeal, we're going to go to the European Court and they are going to crap all over you because we know that we're correct. And then another one they mentioned is Article 6, for example, you know, the right to a fair trial. You cannot obtain evidence illegally on someone and then submit that in court. I mean, in any case, you know, in any jurisdiction, this is a ridiculously gross violation of due process and a fair trial. I mean, it's absurd. And we know for a fact the CIA recorded Julian's, not just Julian Assange in the embassy, which is already, you know, bad enough. They literally recorded his privileged conversations with his lawyers. I mean, Jesus Christ, like any case in the world, even if you want to say Julian Assange is guilty of everything the US is saying, even if This has to be thrown out. It's inadmissible in court. Outrageous. Outrageous. So then, of course, the fact that the United States could use not just these conversations, the spying, coming into play, but the items they stole from him. When they took him out of the embassy, the Ecuadorians then gave all his files, laptops, medical records, legal records. They just handed them over to the Americans. I mean, absolutely disgusting. And then, of course, the jury is biased against Assange because the court in Virginia, in the Eastern District, is made the jury pool. So the people that will be selected randomly for this trial. Actually, really, even if it is 100% random, it's funny because it's still unfair because the people who live and work there are working in the CIA, in the NSA. They're people who work in the agencies that Julian Assange exposed. So if the jury is made up of people who hate Julian Assange's guts, then obviously it's not a fair trial, is it? Then Article 7, no punishment without law. You cannot charge someone with a crime that, saying, well, 10 years ago you committed this crime, but it wasn't a crime back then. And that's what they're doing because the indictment against him is something that has never been done in U.S. history. Even in the United States, prosecuting a publisher in this fashion, no publisher in U.S. history has ever been prosecuted, let alone convicted for what, for just doing their job as a journalist. It's never happened. So that's a violation of Article 7. And then Article 10, the right to free speech. So, this is self-explanatory. What is the indictment doing? It says journalism is illegal. Okay, well, it's a violation of Article 10, violation of his right to free speech. So, he basically explained to them, like, look, the European court are going to carry out this balancing act. They're going to look at what's more important. These poor U.S. spies who were not even harmed, or the lives of the people murdered and tortured by the United States. Obviously, the European court are going to go, the people murdered by the United States count more than your poor informants who weren't even harmed. So he's telling them that this balancing act is going to be undertaken in Julian Assange's favor. The Strasbourg court will say what Julian Assange published had to be published because the crimes in these documents are so big that people have a right to know. The public interest comes into play. So, and then, of course, he pointed this out, that the Strasbourg court will say these U.S. crimes were real. They were happening at the time on the ground. And Julian Assange helped to stop them by publishing these documents because we didn't see any more. I'm sure more of them occurred, but nevertheless, the way he said it was good. There were no more helicopter attacks like the Apache thing, and that the Iraq war came to an end. Obviously, we know that this is a bit more nuanced, but nevertheless, he formulates it well. And so he then says that, the Strasbourg court is not going to say that, well, these colossal, that's the word he used, these colossal ongoing war crimes, they had to continue to protect the identity of informants. That's a ridiculous argument to make, and yet that's what the US are saying. He said the names of these people are in these documents because they were engaged in the very criminality exposed by Julian Assange. And see, he says there is context to these names. They're not random names. These are the names of people who helped, who enabled and facilitated U.S. war crimes and torture. So, and even if you want to say, okay, well, they're innocent names. Once again, you can't say that protecting the identities of these innocent random people mentioned in these documents somehow weighs or counts more than the lives of the people ruined, or the people killed by the United States, the people tortured by the United States. Obviously, they count more, right? The latter counts much, much more. So once again, no matter how you look at it, what Julian Assange did is correct because the crimes committed by the US were so egregious. And so he says that what the district judge did, the lower court decision, didn't even bother talking about this. And he's right. It's absent from the entire bloody judgment. And it's hundreds of pages long. And yet she never even talks about this, which is incredible. So, the fact that he then talks about the fact that Julian could be killed, that's a violation of UK law. He says it's illegal to extradite someone, if you know that they're going to be killed, and it is the Home Secretary's duty to stop the extradition. That's her job. She has to do that, and she knows that there's a high risk that Julian Assange could be killed, and she abdicated her duties to stop the extradition. And so the assurances given by the United States have nothing to do with the death penalty. They don't even mention this, or they don't preclude a death penalty. Basically, what the United States told the UK doesn't ensure and guarantee that they won't kill Julian Assange. Therefore, these assurances are garbage. And not only that, but the Home Secretary herself failed to ask the United States for these assurances. So she knows that they could kill Julian Assange. She knows there's a high chance they could kill Julian Assange. And she didn't even bother to ask for assurances that they won't kill Julian Assange. So she failed to fulfill her duties as Home Secretary. And so, yeah, he says very simply, you know, this thing about him serving his sentence in Australia is ridiculous. You can't apply the prisoner transfer treaty. Forgive me, there's a word missing there, treaty, if you've been killed. That was very well put. He said, we don't understand why there's no usual, normal death penalty assurance in this case, and that this is simply unacceptable. So, in any case, guys, that's my coverage for day 2. Again, please consider supporting my journalism on PayPal or Patreon. And because right now I'm streaming on YouTube, but I'm demonetized on YouTube. So, you know, I'm basically I'm going to keep streaming on YouTube and doing it. But again, they want to make sure that you can't talk about anything. I thought it's nevertheless I have to do this because it's too important, and I've been covering this case for 4 years. So I wanted to go ahead and do it anyway. Tomorrow at 7:15 Eastern Time, I'll be on Glenn Greenwald's System Update to talk about the show, and I'm going on Mario Nofal's Twitter Space right now to talk about this. So you'll see more of me talking about this case on their programs. I gave a speech outside of Downing Street, and you guys can check it out there on Twitter. I'll paste the link below. And again, thank you all for tuning in. Please check out this panel as well. I'll paste the links below. Thanks to all of you for tuning in. Please share this video, educate people about Assange's case, and thank you very much for all of your support. Thank you for supporting independent journalism, and I appreciate you sharing the link and any donations that you can make. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.